Alrighty, so we're going to get going with the first assignment today, and just to explain what the requirements are and to demonstrate what we will be covering, I'm going to jump to Google Chrome real quick. And the reason for that is for this first assignment, we're going to be making a small room. Now, I am going to model a desk and a chair and maybe a shelf or a lamp of some sort. You are free to maybe model items from like your office or your bedroom or whatever. So you could do, a bed and television and anything like that. Just something that would incorporate items that you would find in some sort of room. You could theme it to something if you wanted to, or just do something relatively generic like I will. So the first thing that I'm going to do is and this is what I want to stress as we start to get into these assignments, is using reference photos. Because if you approach me for help and you say, how do I make this thing? Well, I'm going to say, well, what? Like, what part of it are you stuck on, or what part is challenging you? And in the case of looking up, say an office desk, we can jump to Google Images and we can pick out, say, a desk that we like, and in doing so, we can identify certain details of the desk that we might want to make, shelves or cabinets. Does it have an L-shaped desk? Does it have handles on the cabinets? There's all sorts of things that if I just say to you all, envision a desk, like you might envision some sort of desk, but having a photo reference in front of you to work off of is way more valuable than just your memory or just your imagination. So I'm going to look up, I've got something kind of in mind that I'm hoping to find, and this isn't too different than what I want. That's not too bad, actually. So I might open up a handful of these and maybe take reference from a few of them. This one's kind of neat. Well, I've definitely never done a desk like this, so I think I'm going to go with this. So I would encourage you to, maybe think of, or if you want to use some of your time for the daily sketches, to maybe pencil out what you might want to include in your room, just so that way you have a basis to go off of. Writing a list or just pulling individual reference photos for each of the various items might be cool, or if you're going to be doing a room in your house, you could even just take your own photographs with your phone. So all of that is going to give us a good basis to start on. So I'm going to open up this image in a new tab, and this one's cool because I get a different perspective of what maybe the back looks like. So I'm going to open up these two, and I'm going to save these. So I want to save these to my folder, and now is a good time to make an assignment 1, if I can spell it, assignment 1. And in here I will make a reference folder, and in here I will start to save my photos for my desk. Basically, we're going to tackle the items in our room one at a time throughout a handful of lectures, and that's just going to be our plan. Alright, so I've got 2 reference images to work off of. I think that will be a sufficient start for now. And we will get going in Cinema, where we're going to learn some new tools today. So I'm going to open up my 2 photos, and thankfully here at the school we have pairs of monitors, and so I can drag one off to the side. so that way I can work inside of Cinema 4D on the monitor here that you guys will be able to see, and then have the photograph open on the other one next to me.
Should we be looking for desk right now, or are we looking?
It's up to you. If because I do record these lectures, and as soon as I'm done recording, I will upload it to YouTube. It will take a little bit of time for it to upload and for it to process, but you'll be able to watch it through kind of the second half of class. So when I'm lecturing up here, this is just kind of more general, kind of for the rest of the semester. It's up to you on if you want to try to follow along. I know it can be tricky, especially if you are in a desk that is facing away from me, to be able to click and follow along at the same exact time as me. So that can be a little bit of a challenge. So it's up to you on if you want to try to follow along. But if, in this case, I'm just looking up photos, that's something that you can do, and like, you know, while I'm in between steps, you might be able to make some progress on and just sort of watch what I'm doing. And then once the lecture is uploaded, you can go ahead and, you know, actually go about doing the commands yourself. So I would say you can give it a shot, try to follow along. But I do like to try to make these lectures, I don't go as fast as I possibly can, but I do like to keep them as concise as I can, so that way when you guys are watching them back, which is going to be the bulk of the time, there's hopefully a little bit less dead time. So with all that being said, I'm going to get going. So I will leave one of these. Let me open it up another time, actually. Okay. So this way, one will be here on the image. That way I can jump back and forth visually for you guys. So the first thing to do is probably to give us some sort of floor. And we can do that by starting with a plane object. Now, this is something that I haven't really stressed as much in previous semesters, but it is something that I kind of want to give a shot about right now. And that is having a concept of how large you're making something or what scale it's being built in. Now, this isn't going to be, you know, this isn't an engineering class or whatever. I'm not going to grade you on, like, you know, how large the desk is supposed to be versus how large you made it, but it's not a bad idea to keep some of this stuff in mind sometimes. So what I want to demonstrate is right now the default sized floor is 400 centimeters by 400 centimeters. Now, you might not know off the top of your head how many centimeters are in an inch or how to convert those units, but there are a few ways to check inside of Cinema. We could, if we wanted to, change our project settings from centimeters to inches, and the way that I got to the project settings menu is by hitting Control D. But that's not what I'm going to do. The reason for that is I don't know if the setting will reset, because these computers often do. So what I can do is I could Google how large 400 centimeters is, and Google will tell me without much effort, but I know off the top of my head that there are 2.54 centimeters in an inch. So if I was to divide this by 2.54, and the cool thing about Cinema 4D is you can do, if you need to, you can do math directly in these fields. So 2.54. Okay, so that's 157 inches. I don't know how many feet that is, so I could divide that by 12. And so it says the width of this is 13 feet. Now that's about accurate for the size of what I would say like a bedroom or an office room. So if I were to undo these and just get it back to 400 centimeters, that is roughly about the right size. The reason I'm going about doing this is if we were to make a desk and we were to immediately start making the desk based off of this scale, then the desk would be 13 feet big, not the room. So that's why I kind of wanted to suggest this. So this is going to be our floor, and everything we build inside of this will kind of fit within our floor. So that was a really long-winded way to say that when I make my first cube that is going to become my desk, I ought to scale this down a bit. Because I don't know about you, but I don't know of too many 13-foot long sized desks. Maybe if you're really, really cool, but the reference photo that I have, based off of the width of the seat, I would say that this would be no wider than one person's arm span, so maybe 5 feet. So I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. Again, I'm not going to be grading you on how large your desk should be, but I'm going to scale the top of my desk so that it roughly fits the dimensions of this top part. So I'm going to make it a little bit more shallow, a little bit shorter, and I think that's not too bad of a start. So we're going to learn a handful of tools today, and these are going to be tools that are relevant for modeling, and these are kind of the building block tools for us to be able to create whatever sort of shape that we want to create. In the class last week, when we were just playing around, we used only the primitive shapes and we left them alone as is, you know, only working with spheres or pyramids or cubes or whatever. But this is obviously much more complicated of a shape than those, so there's a handful of tools that we need to learn. And the first thing that we need to do is go over how to access those. So I'm going to rename this to be desk top, because this is going to be, you know, the wooden portion of the top of my desk. Because I'm going to have legs and I might have a bottom and whatever else, you know, I just want to label these as clear as I can. So in the case of my desk, I'm going to need to round out parts of the top because this is a, you know, a rounded top. This might be some sort of like drafting table or something. So I would say, you know, kind of this edge here and this edge here are going to be the sides that I am going to need to round out. So how do I get to those? Well, first step is going to be making our cube editable, and that is this button in the upper left-hand corner. It is underneath the undo arrow. It's sort of these two spheres, and one of them has a bit of orange in the middle. But also, as we mouse over this, we can see in the tooltip that pops up, it says the shortcut is the letter C on our keyboard. And so that's going to be the button that I hit. Now, nothing really looks all that different. It's surprising. But there actually is a pretty important distinction to make now. If we look at the icons next to our objects in the objects list, we can see that this object changed. So if I undo it to where it was still a cube, we see that that is a cube-shaped icon. And if I make my object editable again, we see that the icon changes to a little triangle with 3 white dots on each end. Now this icon, it's not super important, but it is signifying that this is now a polygon-based object, and we are free to start making changes to it. Those changes being these 3 selection modes over here on the left-hand side. Point mode, edge mode, and polygon mode. So if I was to select each of these, or I'm going to go through them kind of one at a time, but if I select point mode, we can see that we have these light blue lines that highlight, or these light blue lines that appear now on our object. And in this case, in point mode, I can click the points where the edges intersect, and in doing so, I see that it changes orange or yellow, whatever. And this means that I can move or rotate or scale or whatever, but I can move this single component on its own. As opposed to before, when we were working with the cube and we were using those orange little handles, we could only scale it sort of, you know, lengthwise, height-wise, or depth-wise. I have now much more control. And I can cycle through the different selection modes and start to select these different things and see how all of this starts to interact differently. But I had sized my desk relatively well, I feel, so I don't need to make any movements or any adjustments to these component modes. But what I do want to do is select my two top edges here, because again, these are the two edges that I want to round. Again, you're free to make a different sort of desk if you wanted to make a desk that looks more like this kind of a desk that has shelves or cabinets or whatever. Don't worry, just because I'm showing a different style desk doesn't mean that what I will demonstrate today won't be applicable. You most certainly can make a little bit more traditional looking of a desk. I'm just going to be going through these tools one at a time as they are relevant to the specific desk that I am tackling right now.
You would shift click to select more than one thing, so correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
So the question is just to be able to select multiple of these components at once. Yes, I do want to click the first one and then hold shift to continue adding onto my selection. That's the case with any of the different components. So with these two edges selected, we are ready to learn our first modeling tool. And there are a handful of ways of accessing these tools. The first one being the right-click menu. So this is just right-clicking with the mouse, and we see a whole host of options come up. And I'm looking for the bevel tool. So I could click the bevel tool and select it, but for demonstration purposes, I'm going to show the hotkeys as well, because while we're in this menu, we see all of these hotkeys that come up, and they all, or for the most part, a lot of them start with the letter M, and then they have a second letter after them. So let's see what that's all about. So if I hit M on my keyboard, this is where the fun little quirk of this interface comes up. If I hit M, you might be tempted to move your mouse and go click on the option that you were looking for. In this case, bevel has the letter S. So I might be tempted to move my mouse and go find that menu, but when I move my mouse, it goes away. So what's that all about? Well, the handful of quick menus in this program, when you hit them, we'll go over these kind of one at a time, but in this case, the M menu for the modeling tools, what you need to do is not move your mouse, but use your keyboard to hit the following key. So in this case, S for bevel. So again, that is M, S, or you could find it by right-clicking. But at any rate, we can see that our mouse cursor has changed. We are no longer in the Move tool, and that is signified by the fact that we have this little icon that is attached to our mouse. This is indicating that we are in the Bevel tool, right up here. So if I click and drag, I can see that I'm starting to kind of slant those two corners, and that doesn't quite look too right. I wanted these to be round. So what's the deal? Well, over here in the attributes panel, again on the lower right hand side, this is going to update depending on what tool you are in, and in this case the setting that I want to change is this parameter, which is called subdivision. Right now it is at 0, which means that when we make this operation, it is adding no extra polygons. But if I click to raise this value, we can see that it is adding extra edges, and the more edges we add, the rounder it gets. Now, when I say that, I don't mean just go ahead and immediately add 100 edges, because that's just way too many. But somewhere in this case is pretty good. I might try like 4 or 5, just for fun. And that looks pretty good, I think. So the next thing that I want to go over is, well, we can probably do the edges here. That's not a bad time to do the edges. So I've got my tabletop, which is made of these wooden slats, and then on the sides here I have this black. This might be some sort of like vinyl or like a fake plastic or a leather even maybe, because the image is relatively small. It is tricky to say exactly what it is, but if I'm going to want to apply a different color or a different material to these, which I will soon, I'm going to need some extra polygons to signify the sides of the desk. So let's set that up. So presumably there's one on the other side of the desk, so I'm going to treat both sides of the desk equally. And in doing so, I want to select, in this case, now I'm going to switch to polygon selection mode and select this side of the desk and move my mouse around to the other side and select this side as well. So I've got both sides of my desk selected, and the next tool that we're going to use is called the extrude tool. So the extrude tool, again, has a couple ways of finding it. You could right click and see that it is right here, the extrude tool. We see it has a M quick menu hotkey, M and then T. So we can try that, M and then T. And this switches us to the extrude tool now, as we see in our attributes. But there's also another hotkey, and it is even a faster hotkey, and that is just the letter D on the keyboard. D as in dog. So with the extrude tool selected, I can now perform this next operation, and like we did with the bevel tool, we made a selection, we activated our tool, and then we used the tool. So I'm going to do the same thing by left clicking and dragging, and I'm going to expand out the sides of my desk just a little bit, so that way I've got a strip on the side that I can later apply my black material onto. So that looks pretty accurate, I would say. As far as the width of it, should be good. And the next thing that we can do is, well, we can start on the leg. I think we can start on the leg. So in tackling this assignment or tackling this object, I do want to start to incorporate the idea to you guys of thinking how this object might realistically be built. Maybe not how it's manufactured or whatever, but if you were to, you know, buy this desk, and let's just say it came like IKEA or whatever, it comes in a box and you have to put it together, because it is most likely made of separate pieces. In this case, the legs, this may or may not be two separate halves that you combine, but I'm going to treat this whole metal leg over here as one big old leg. And the reason for that is because I have a start over here on my desk, and I can use a command that will give me a pretty good starting place, because, you know, I could make a cube, go and move the cube and resize it and get it to be about the same size as the desk and start to turn this into the leg. I could do all that, but there's a better command that we can use here. So if I go down to my desk, and in this case I want to go underneath the desk because I'm looking for, in my case, this polygon right here. I could start with this shape right here and make this turn into my leg, because it's already the right proportion I need, it's already in the right position I need. It just makes way more sense for me to start with this point than by making a whole new block. Depending on the shape of your desk, that might be a different story, but for me, I am going to start here. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to learn another quick menu. Up to this point, we've used the M quick menu a handful of times to look for commands, but there are a number of other quick menus. This next one that I'm looking for is the letter U. So the command that I'm looking for, basically what I want to do is I want to take this currently selected polygon and pull it off of my desk and turn it into a new shape. And the command that I'm looking for, does anyone want to take a guess out of what's on this list?
Subdivide?
We could start with subdivide. We certainly could, but I think
Grow selection.
we could do grow selection. We'll actually we will cover that one. But the one that I'm thinking of, because I want to separate this, I'm going to give a shot at the disconnect command. Or maybe split. Yeah, I'm going to do split. So that is P. So we will hit U and then P. And we will see that it kind of looks a little bit different than what we expected. We're used to when we select a polygon for it to be brightly colored orange. But if we select that one, it looks a little bit different. And the reason for that is because it made another object for us. So we have our desk top, and when I did the command split, it actually took that existing polygon and turned it into a whole new object for us, which was exactly what I was looking for. So I can rename this leg, or desk leg, table leg, whatever. And going from here, I can start to do a whole new slew of commands and start to shape this desk into what I'm looking for. So, as we can see, there's a little bit of thickness at the top here. So I'm going to give a shot at extruding this. So again, that is D as in dog. So I'm going to left click and drag down a little bit, and we will make this first bit of thickness here on the side. This portion of the desk is needed to support the weight of the tabletop, obviously, so we want it to be nice and sturdy. So that looks pretty good. Now, if I do another command to extrude, I don't want to extrude the whole, vertically the whole way down. I only want this middle portion. So how do we isolate only the middle here, right? I only want like a little portion down the middle. I don't want this whole dang thing. So here we go, yet another tool. There's a whole lot of them to cover, but this one is pretty self-explanatory. It is the knife tool. And the reason that we want to do this is we want to cut in a segment along the middle here. So the knife tool has a quick menu, and it is K for knife. And so we might be interested in the line cut tool, which would be K again, or we could try L, and I'm going to give L a shot. So that is again K and then L for the loop knife tool. So with this tool selected, we can see that it will now want to give us a cut sort of all the way around our object. And the nice thing about this is if we hold shift, we can snap it. Although that's maybe not necessary because I need to do two cuts actually. Because if I was to scribble on this, basically what I want to do, oh, come on. If I was to scribble like little notes on this, I want to make a cut here and a cut here. Hopefully that makes sense why I only want to extrude this portion in the middle here and not any of this. So we will make a cut. So that's our sort of 50% mark. I'll go kind of over there and kind of over there. Again, doesn't need to be super precise, but if we go back to our polygon selection tool, we can now only select that portion in the middle. So that's going to be cool. We can extrude that on down. Refer back to our drawing. So we need to go not all the way down to the ground, because we're going to need to do basically the opposite of what we just did, because we need to bow out the sides here. So I don't want to take this all the way down to the floor. I want to go just above it a bit. So I will do one more extrusion. Oops. And so in selecting the tool again, I was able to make a second extrusion. And now I can select that one and this one and extrude these out. Bada bing, bada boom. So we got ourselves a desk leg. So, any guesses on what we want to do to make the other leg? That's a great suggestion. The suggestion was copy and paste, because I don't want to have to do all that again. That's silly. These legs are supposed to be identical, at least I would think, with a desk shaped like this. Maybe you have a desk that's fancy and it doesn't have identical legs, but mine sure look like they ought to be identical. So I could name this desk leg 1, copy and paste it, name it desk leg 2, and at this point we can now see, whoa, something a little weird's going on. So my object is over here, as is highlighted by the orange, highlighting around the polygon, but my move tool, my anchor point, if you will, is over here. So what's going on there? So the reason that happened is because as we started to go ahead and did all these commands, remember, we made these desk legs based on a polygon that originated from this desk top. And this desk top's anchor point, or whatever, axis, whatever you want to call it, it is right here. And these legs, they didn't know any better. They just took the anchor point that they had at the moment that they were created. So it can be a little bit confusing, like why my move tool doesn't seem to be lined up with my object. Now, if you don't care about that, if that doesn't bother you too much, you can just kind of deal with it and move it. But if you do want to fix that, we can go ahead and do so. So up to this point, we've been using a lot of hotkeys, which are great. They will make your productivity pretty snappy and pretty quick. But once in a while, we do have to dig into the menus up at the top of the program here. And in this case, we are looking for this axis center menu, which was under mesh. So we clicked mesh and then axis center. The axis just being the term that is given to the anchor point, quote unquote, because it's not called an anchor point in 3D, it's called the axis. But anchor point is a term that I use almost interchangeably. And once we mouse over this axis center menu, there are a handful of ones that we could look for. In this case, center axis 2 is going to be the one that we are looking for. So again, because we have two objects, we can do that a second time. So I've got my desk selected. This is the one without a properly set up anchor point. So I went to mesh, axis center, center axis 2. And it is just the one, it's the one with sort of the L shape. And what this is doing is it's basically just looking at all of the polygons that make up that object, and it's putting the axis point kind of just in the middle, like the average position. And now we can see that that's centered up, where we want it to be. So that's not too shabby. We can nudge this over just a little bit more because if we look on the side of the desk, the leg and the side of the desk seem to be relatively flush, so I don't want there to be an overhang or an underhang. So I don't think that's too bad right there. So let's go ahead and make some more parts of this desk.
Would there be any way to like snap it to the edge of your?
There is a way, yeah. So the question is like how, if we wanted to, how could we snap that edge? So I'm going to just move this off to the side. If you did care so much as to get it more accurate, what we can do, and this is an okay time to show off a couple new things. Up to this point, we can see our objects have polygons and edges and points and all that, but we can't really see them. The reason for that is because currently the viewport is set to not display them. So if we click display, there are a whole bunch of fun words, but the first one is the normal shading mode, and the second one is that same normal shading mode, but in parentheses it says lines. So if we switch to that mode, we can see, whoa, cool, we can see all of our edges and our polygons on all of our shapes. And the reason for this is it's important because, well, at least I think it's important to turn this mode on if we do want to snap things together. Now, if you were to take a quick glance at the interface and look for something that might be signifying of snapping, you could, but I can just go ahead and let you know that it is the magnet that is down here on the lower left hand side, and it says enable snapping. Now if we turn that on and we just start moving things around, we can see, well, it's like kind of doing something. It's snapping things occasionally, maybe, kind of, but it's a little weird because by default, if we click and hold down on that snapping icon, we can see that it is only, out of all of the different modes of snapping, it only has vertex snapping on. Vertex is a fun, different way to say point mode. So we could enable edge snapping mode if we wanted to, and we could take a shot at snapping this to the side, and maybe if we use our middle mouse button to change our camera, maybe we can have some more luck, but it's still not quite really doing what we want it to. So what do? Why does the snapping seem to suck so much, you might wonder? Well, because it's kind of dependent on where your mouse is, which is a little annoying, and we can override that by moving the anchor point ourselves. So like we just showed in the mesh axis center axis 2 menu, that was one way for us to tell the program where to move the anchor point. We can go ahead and do that ourselves at any point in time if we want to by hitting the L key on our keyboard. And if we do that, we can see that this L-shaped arrow on the side of our interface actually lights up when it is enabled. And this is called the enable axis mode. So if we move this, or sorry, if we have this enabled now and move our move tool, we can see we can move the anchor point. So I'm able to move the anchor point, but not the object. And this is what's important to get a good snapping. And we can actually do this to snap our object perfectly to the floor in a moment. But I'm going to move the anchor point to the outside edge of this object because this is the side that I want it to be flush on. And so now that I've got my anchor point in the right place, I can turn off the anchor point modifying tool, and I can now snap this perfectly to the side of the desk. So if that didn't make a whole lot of sense, or if it's not even relevant to you and you're watching the recording, feel free to not pay a whole lot of attention to that. But if it is important to you to have these things lined up, again, we can always use the middle mouse button to change our cameras and get these super closely snapped. It's not a bad idea to give it a shot. So now that that's set up, I'm actually going to move my axis center back to the middle, and I don't really care that that's going through the floor for right now. Again, I'm not grading this like it's a engineering class. So we're going to get this show back on the road, and we're going to make this little beam. It's like a little footrest kind of dealio, and that shouldn't be too hard, I don't think. We can just make that with a cube, just an little old cube. Scale that down, scale that down. So if I want, I can enter in values over here, maybe even slightly smaller. And I'm not going to be precise here. It looks like the footrest favors one side as opposed to the other. It's not perfectly centered, so cool. That looks good enough for me. Call that footrest. Oopsie daisy. Well, actually, that's not a bad thing to show at this point. So I've got a couple pieces of my desk. Let's just say I'm not a crazy person and I don't have a desk just in the middle of the room. Like I've never walked into a room and there was just a desk alone in the middle of the room. Usually desks are maybe off to the side or they're up against a wall, maybe. So let's go ahead and do that. So if I select my desktop and I move it maybe off to the wall, well, we see something's not really moving the way that we want to. So we should probably group these things. Grouping is a really important thing, just like in Photoshop, keeping handfuls of layers together with one another if you want them to interact or to move or scale with one another. It is important, and similar to Photoshop, where you use G to group things, it's actually Control G. Control G is not group in Cinema, but it is Alt G, just cause. So with all of those objects selected, I hit Alt G, and it gave me a null object. And again, a null object is nothing. Like the name null implies, it isn't a thing. It doesn't have any polygons, it doesn't have any edges. It is basically just a organizational tool that our objects list can serve as a group. So I can call this desk group, and I can move my whole desk over now back over to this wall on over here, because I want to maybe make this the front of my room, and this is the desk that will be along the back wall. You know, I'll add a chair and some other stuff, but I think we've been going for a minute. It's not a bad idea to take a break for a moment, and we will pick this back up. We'll do some basic material stuff, get some colors, materials applied to this desk, and we will wrap it up. So I will pause, and I'll let you guys take like a 10-minute break, get up, stretch, grab a drink if you need to, and we'll pick things back up at 6:05. So I will pause. All right, cool. So we are still recording, and we are going to wrap up this desk. So there are a few more little details that I want to cover, so that way we can get into applying our materials. So there is a sort of a white strip along the front of this desk. So I can go ahead and add in a cut or two with my knife tool. So typically when using the knife tool, I would say probably more than half the time we're in edge mode. So If you want to just get in the habit of doing that, I usually do. So we will hit K to get to our knife tool quick menu, and then use L for the loop cut again. So I'm going to make one cut sort of along the front here, and again, the reason for that is we have this small white strip along the front that is underneath or in between two portions of wood. So I would say we can add maybe one more kind of like here, and when it comes time to adding our materials, we can add that cream or white, whatever we want to call it, material to sort of say this polygon right here. This might be some sort of drawer or some sort of pull-out something, who knows. I'm not really going to put that much thought into it, but there is still a few more shapes that we can make. One being this divider, or whatever we want to call it. Looks like it runs just in between the two legs, sort of along the upper, maybe 1/4 or so. So I can probably, just like how we made the footrest, might actually not be too bad of an idea to copy and paste the footrest. Oops. And we'll call this divider, and I can move that back in the middle and then back up, and then make it a bit taller, that orange little handle there. So that doesn't look too bad, I would say. And then we can just real quickly make this back section. Now, I don't know what color or what material is really back there. I really only can see the side right here, and this has the same black or dark, vinyl or plastic, whatever that we are going to be applying to the side. So I'm just going to assume that the whole thing is made of that. I could find more Google photos, but I don't really mind for the time being. So let's, because we already have this divider here, we can again copy and paste that and call this, I don't know, rear section. I don't know what that's called. I'm not a desk scientist. I don't know the technical terms of what makes up a desk. So I'm just going to kind of get something rough into place. Again, I don't know what the back looks like, so I don't know if it extends all the way along the back. Who knows? One of the nice things about modeling things is what you see can't hurt you. So sometimes you can get away with stuff if it is not relevant to the task at hand. So I can make this editable, and we can walk back through the bevel tool, because again, looks like I'm going to need to apply a little bit of rounding to that back section. So I made my box editable. Again, that was using the C key or clicking the button in the interface right there. I can now switch to my edge selection and just select this one edge along the back segment and get back to my bevel tool. Again, that is M and then S in the quick menu, or just by right clicking. And now I can just go and execute that bevel command. So that should be about all we need to do as far as the modeling for this desk. Now we certainly could go a little bit further and round things out, and actually it might not be a bad idea to go ahead and do some of that, just because it won't be too in depth. So along the edges of our what do you call it? We can just erase all of this funness. So I want to replicate the curve that is right here on each of these parts of the leg. And the bevel tool is perfect for that. So we can just go ahead and select these inside creases or edges, whatever you want to call them. Get all those selected up. Grab our bevel tool once again and go to town. So we will see that if I start pushing this too far, the polygons will start to intersect. Things are going to start sticking through the floor, and I don't really want to deal with all of that. Now there are a whole host of options here on the bevel tool, which maybe if we were to mess around with these, we might get lucky. Again, no, that doesn't look too bad. I'm going to consider ourselves lucky for finding, in this case, the ending option if we set it to insert instead of default. Again, I can't know every single option in this program. There's just too many things to cover. But if what I just demonstrated is anything, it is go ahead and just try to change stuff. I mean, occasionally you can just get lucky by clicking on different options. If you're worried about something going wrong, it's never a bad idea to go ahead and save beforehand, which I actually haven't done. So that would be a shame if something were to happen. So I'm going to go ahead and save. So again, this is just my name, assignment number 1. I like to describe it a little bit, and then I'm going to say version 1. You don't have to be that thorough with your naming, but I would definitely encourage you to go ahead and just start being that descriptive with your file names. And then this way, when I come in the next day, I can start with a version 2. The following day, I can do a version 3. And the reason for that is you never know if these files could corrupt, or something might get deleted or removed off of the computer. It could crash. Who knows? So if I save multiple versions and I try to make copies by taking them home, or using a flash drive or an external hard drive like I recommended in the syllabus, hopefully you'll have at least some sort of version to fall back and rely on if something tragic happens. But anyway, that should be good. We've got our beveling all cool. And we'll see that we made these changes to this desk, or to this leg, but none of those changes happened over here. And that's kind of lame. The reason for that is because we just copy and pasted it. Copy and pasting seems like a pretty good idea from the get-go, but in this case, it wasn't or isn't the best option. The reason for that is we made a change to this leg over here, and that change did not reflect or carry over to this other leg. And why is that? Well, if you just copy and paste something, it's a copy of it at the point in time when you copy and pasted. It is no longer linked, but we can link these objects. If you're familiar with Photoshop or more advanced tools in Photoshop, a smart object, or maybe in After Effects, making copies of a composition or a pre-composition. Those are all methods of making a change and having it carry over and duplicate numerous times. So all of that is a long way to say that there is a tool. It is under this second green menu, the Array menu, and it is called the instance. So this instance object, we want to make this with the object in question already selected. So again, I've got this desk leg. This is the good one, the one that I've already done work to. So I click and hold on the array button, and I make an instance. So I see that there's this desk leg 2 instance in this case. And this is a direct copy of the object that it just was. And so this one, we can go ahead and move on over. And the reason for doing this is, now if I turn off the old one, okay, so I can, well, let me just turn it off for now. So let's just say, I don't know, let's just say I needed to select a bunch of these points. I'm just gonna do this. Just for demonstration purposes, let's just say I needed to lift up the size of this desk leg. We can see that the instance copy, not the copy and pasted copy, but the instance version, is mirroring these same changes. And that is because it is a live and an active copy of the object that we made. So in this case, pretty shortly we will be applying materials to, or colors to this object. I would recommend using an instance where possible, if you have a desk with multiple legs, for example, or if you have multiple desks, even. At any rate, I hid, or I could just delete this other copy, but for right now, I guess I can just demonstrate how we hide things. So in Photoshop, again, I just use Photoshop as a reference because as far as I remember, it's the only prereq to this class. But in Photoshop, we have an eyeball next to layers, and that's how we turn things on and off. In Cinema 4D, we have something similar, but it takes on a different form, and it is what most people have nicknamed the traffic lights. Are these little pairs of, usually they're gray, dots, but if you click them and they turn red, that allows you to hide an object. And if you click it again and it turns green, it can be a little bit tricky, but green means it's manually, it's like overriding it to be on. But anyway, they're lights or little dots. They can either be gray, red, or green, depending on what state you want them to be. So that's why most people call them the traffic lights. But anyway, this old copy, I don't even need it, so I can just delete it by hitting delete on my keyboard. And I think that will take us through the modeling section of the desk. I think we can move on to making the materials now. So here's our desk. Now there's a couple things that we're going to be looking for. Probably the easiest one to start off with is this black plastic or vinyl, whatever. So we can go ahead and make a new material. And right off the bat, again, I double clicked down in this material menu, or you could click create new material, but whatever. I made the new material and then I double clicked to open it up and edit its settings, and immediately I'm going to rename it. So I'm just going to call this desk black sides because I like to be as organized as possible. I'm going to change this to a darker color. I'm not going to go all the way purely to black. I'm just going to pick a dark gray, I think. And again, we want to apply that dark gray material to the sides of our desk. Right? The side, and also, oops, if I zoom in, I also want it to be on the strip that runs along the top as well. Get back to Cinema. So I could sit here and shift click all of these, but that would be silly. It would also be very tedious when there is a command that is perfectly suited for this task, and it is under the U quick menu. Now actually somebody said there are two options that we could use in this case, and one of them was said earlier when we were doing another tool, and that was grow selection. That's all the way at the bottom because of course the word grow has a Y in it, and the hotkey is Y. So if we hit U and then Y, we see that it added this extra ring around. So if I just demonstrate that again, I selected this polygon and I hit U, Y, and it basically selected one, neighboring ring around it. So if I do it again, we'll see that it will select now the whole middle portion, because it's basically stepping one side outwards each time you complete that command. So I could do that, but there's also another menu, or another option in this menu, and it is the loop selection under L. So L. So I could now hold shift to add that selection. And this is, in this case, a little bit more friendly because I can control it a little bit more predictably. So there we go. That was a whole long way of selecting just the sides of our desk, but now that we've got that, we can apply this material onto the orange polygons that we have highlighted, and we will see that they will turn a darker color. So whoa, okay, cool. That did a thing. So now we can go ahead and make or find a wood texture. So if I go back to Google Images and I get back to here, we can go and look up a wood texture, and this will allow us to find a wood grain of some flavor. I'm not a connoisseur of the different types of wood, so I don't know if this is, I don't know, a walnut or a mahogany or whatever all those fun types of wood are. So I'm just going to look for one of these sort of darker kind of ones. But there are a few tricks that we can use to make our Google searching a little bit better. Because if we mouse over this, we see that the resolution of this image is 540 by 270. That's super, super tiny. It's almost unusably tiny, I would say. Not that we need anything, ultra realistic, but if I click the word tools and click show sizes, I can see the size of all of these images at once, and I can also just filter them by the largest size. So those are some options that might help. That's not too bad, although it's a little bit lighter than I would want, maybe. That one's not too shabby. This one's kind of cool. This one already has planks in it. And my desk has planks, even though they're not proportioned quite the same. Might not be too bad to try that out. And again, you don't need to find an exact match. Everyone's desk is going to be different, so I'm going to expect a variety of them anyway. But it doesn't hurt to try. So just for the sake of things going quicker, I'm just going to download this one. So I will save this. And now when I save this, I don't want to save it into my reference folder. What I want to do is actually, if you're watching this and following it one at a time, don't do what I'm actually about to do. I'm just going to do this for demonstration purposes. Wood texture. So I'm just going to save this into the folder where this project is. For the time being, this is again for demonstration purposes. So I'm going to make a new material, and this is going to be the wood material. Wood, oh no, sorry, desk, wood, grain. Okay, so I've got my wood grain material, or sorry, yeah, I've got my wood grain material made, but it's just a blank white material. It doesn't actually look like wood. So we want to input that texture we just saved from Google into this slot right here where it says texture. Currently it's blank because there's nothing plugged in. So we could, if we wanted to, open up the folder where we have the wooden texture, and we could drag and drop, or we could click the little dot next to it. And this is where something important, this is what I need to demonstrate to you guys. So when I said don't do what I was about to do, this is why. So if I click this wooden texture and I click open, it is going to work for the time being, but if I save this file and I come back or I go home and I need to open it up on a different computer, it very likely won't link up. And what I mean by that is you'll open up this project and this will just be black. This image won't show up and the computer won't know where to find it. And the reason for that is because we need to make a folder. Anywhere that we're going to be using textures, we need to make a folder, and it needs to be named tex, just lowercase TEX. This is just the way that Cinema 4D works, so if this is annoying, I apologize, but deal with it. There's this folder called text, and this is actually where I want my wood texture to be. So I can move it into that folder. Again, now this is where my wood texture is, and if I go to click into this, I want to make sure that it is going to link back to the same one. Now things aren't going to really look different, but I know, and I can ensure that the next time I reopen this file, if I open it on a different computer, it will know exactly where to find this material. So I can quit blabbing and just apply this to my desk, and it looks kind of like wood now, which is kind of cool. That wasn't too hard, but we'll notice that the black sides disappeared, and this is now something else that we want to explain. So the way that Cinema 4D calculates things, it is in a specific order, and what I mean by that is if we take a look over here at the desk object, we can see a number of these circular tags have started to appear. Now these correspond to, our materials down here from the material menu. If we think back to the first day project, we were assigning one material to one object at a time. But in this case, we need 2 or maybe more materials per object. So why aren't these stacking as we thought? Well, the reason is because Cinema 4D reads these from left to right. So in this order, at least it's calculating the materials from left to right. So first it is applying the black material, which we applied to the sides, and we know that we applied it to the sides only because there's this menu right here called selection, and it has a polygon selection piece of text written into it. That actually corresponds to this orange little tag. See how when if we select this tag, again, this is the black material, these are called tags, so this is the black material tag. We see this line item right here called polygon selection .1, and if we select this orange triangle next to it, this is polygon selection .1. If we select this wooden material, it doesn't have that, and the reason for that is because we applied these materials 2 different ways. If that isn't clear, feel free to rewind back to when I was applying these, but when I applied the wooden material, I was in object mode, or model mode, sorry, excuse me, and when I applied the black material, I was in polygon mode. So that's an important distinction. But all of that is to explain what is going on. How do I fix it? Is I just need to put these in a different order. If I apply the wooden material to the quote left or before the black material, we see that they are now getting stacked in the order that I expected them to be applied in. The wooden material is going on first, and then the black material, because it is only applied to certain polygons, is overriding the edges here. So that's all cool. We can get on with our lives. So I can go ahead and select that rear section down there, apply that to that, and as we work our way back through this desk, we can remember that there was this cream colored segment in the middle here. So I can go ahead and make a material for that. Now I could double click, or I could copy and paste the materials. So I can make this, instead of it being the desk, I can make this white front, or cream, whatever color. And on my second monitor, I'm actually going to use the color pick, the eyedropper, to grab the correct cream color. And then we can go ahead and, again, we remember we want to select this or apply this only to this middle section in the front. So just to again explain the way the materials stack is we have this one polygon selected, we can apply this one material, and we can see that it applied that new material, and now this has a polygon selection number 2, and that corresponds to now this new selection tag. So this is what determines how materials are applied where. We will be using that a few more times, so don't worry if that wasn't super clear. Don't stress. We will cover it some more. So I'm just going to quickly find some more materials. I know that I'm going to need something that maybe a different type of material or a different type of wood or a cork of some sort maybe. I'm actually probably just going to use this one just for simplicity's sake. Oh, that is way too small. My goodness. That one has watermarks. So for the purpose of a school assignment, I'm not going to stress about purchasing these. So that one doesn't have a watermark. That's cool with me. Alright, so that should be good enough. We'll save that into our text folder. So we'll call this light wood fixture. Oops, if I spell divider correctly. So I'll load in that wood material there. We'll apply that to that object right there. Not looking too bad. Cool. So now the last material that we need to apply is for our legs, and we can do so by double clicking to get down to this material. So this will be the last thing that we cover for today, so don't worry, there's not a whole lot more. So we need to make this look metallic, right? This is a it's not a color based object like wood or this black. It is all metallic. And what you're seeing when you look at something that is metallic, now this might sound really obvious, but it's something that I do need to explain. If you're looking at something that is reflective, you're not seeing the color of the object, you're seeing what it is reflecting, right? So a reflective object doesn't necessarily outright have a color of its own, because it's due to its reflective nature, it's kind of taking on the resemblance of what's around it. So what do I mean by that? That sounds kind of confusing. Well, really, it just means that over here on the left-hand side of our materials, if I name this desk metal legs, what it means is it's going to introduce us to all of the different channels here. Now, up to this point, we haven't even looked at these. We've just been working in the default color channel. Now, when I say that a reflective object doesn't have a color of its own, what that should signify is that we can uncheck the color channel. We'll see that this will turn black because, well, now it has no color of its own, but we want to jump ahead or jump down to the channel that says reflectance. So this reflectance layer is kind of somewhat reminiscent of Photoshop in a sense. It's a little bit more complicated, but we have layers. And if we add a new layer, this is broken up into a handful of categories, but really all we need to worry about, just for the time being, for simplicity's sake, is we can just pick the first one on the list, Beckmann, and we see that now the little preview of our material looks metallic. It looks very chrome-like. This looks like a magic crystal ball or a chrome ball, not necessarily like a roughened metallic leg, but there is one easy setting that we can change, and that is this roughness value right down here. So a roughness of 0 means that this object is perfectly 100% reflective. It is like the most reflective thing ever made in the history of ever. So that's just too reflective. And if we raise this roughness value, if I go all the way to 100%, well, now it barely even looks reflective anymore. But if we mess around somewhere kind of in the middle, we can see that this will look at varying levels of polishedness, and somewhere kind of in the middle is where I would expect a kind of roughened, maybe sort of slightly beat up, definitely not brand new metallic leg like this to look like. So that's all cool. We can worry about making that look a little bit more realistic later, but for the time being, we can just apply that onto our legs and onto the little footrest. And we can see that things are starting to look somewhat reflective here. And so I think that's a good place to wrap it. I will stop this recording. We'll pick up on the next class on making the legs, or sorry, making a chair and some other objects potentially. So for the time being, that will be it for this lecture, and I will stop it now.